just to let you know that the
Morning.
recording started.
Brilliant. So we start now?
Yeah.
Before we begin, can I thank the Chief Constable, Joe Farrell, and members of her senior leadership team for joining me today to participate in this public accountability meeting. The focus of this meeting will be around public contact arrangements for anyone wanting to pass on information, report crime, or communicate with Durham Constabulary. This meeting will review the police single non-emergency number, that's the 101, and other forms of communication including website contact, social media and in person. As your elected Police and Crime Commissioner, I actively encourage the input of residents of County Durham and Darlington in my public accountability meetings. Asking pertinent and relevant questions of the force really helps me to deliver an efficient and effective police service for our communities and one that delivers on the needs of all of our residents. Resilient and cohesive communities are more likely to engage with services, report crime and antisocial behaviour, and also get involved in making their areas feel safer, stronger, cleaner and greener. To reduce crime and antisocial behaviour, we really need to get better at targeting police and partner resources efficiently and effectively. This can only be done if residents report all crime and antisocial behaviour to the relevant agencies. Unfortunately, this is often not the case. Residents regularly tell me that it's not easy to report crime, and it's estimated that a third of them experiencing a crime didn't report it to the police. In fact, the College of Policing estimates that for any given police force, between 60 and 80% of demand on police time comes from non-crime related incidents. And residents are often confused about where to report their issues, be it police, council, fire and rescue, health services. And because of this, Durham Constabulary experiences significant and increasing demand for non-crime incidents, which are often linked to the issues of vulnerability, public protection, mental health and safeguarding. As your elected Police and Crime Commissioner, I'm really committed to improving communication channels to make it easier, faster to report crime and antisocial behaviour to the police and also the appropriate agencies by giving residents the confidence and assurance that they need to report issues. Such intelligence enables analysts to provide our neighbourhood specialist teams with timely and accurate information that identifies crime hotspots. In turn, this facilitates effective multi-agency problem-solving approaches, which enables us, along with partners, to develop local solutions to local problems. My approach will be to procure technological solutions that will enable our officers to gather information about victims, offenders and locations, and to enable them to target resources more efficiently and effectively. I really want to encourage the public to report issues to the appropriate agencies, and I'm very determined to improve the responsiveness of our 101 single non-emergency number. Resilient and confident communities are more likely to report crime and antisocial behaviour, and they are more likely to work with us and others to prevent crime and disorder. I want to make our communities feel safe and have the confidence to share their intelligence to help us prevent and detect more crimes and bring those responsible to justice. Over the last few weeks, I've given residents of County Durham and Darlington the opportunity to put forward any questions and comments about the contact arrangements with Durham Constabulary. I'm really pleased to say that I've had a good response to this public consultation that has included some useful comments as well as questions that we're going to put to Durham Constabulary and who are going to respond in more detail. A full recording of this meeting, including all questions and answers, will be uploaded on YouTube and will be made available to the public. Previous accountabilities where PCCs and hold the Chief Constable and the force to account for policing in the area have not been open to the public or recorded, but as your elected PCC, I wanted to address this by being more open, accountable and transparent in the delivery of my duties and decision making. The recorded meetings enable residents to see how the accountability process works and the role the PCC plays in delivering an efficient and effective police service by scrutinising the performance of the force and ensuring it is responsive to the needs of the residents of County Durham and Darlington. I trust that this progressive approach will enable me to give residents the opportunity to raise what matters most to them, so I can hold the Chief Constable to account on their behalf and make County Durham and Darlington safer, stronger and more resilient to crime, drugs and antisocial behaviour. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has submitted the questions around this really important subject and one that's to the heart of many of our local residents. And for all those who provided a name and address with your question or contact details, I will ensure that my office provides you with a personal response on my behalf. In a few minutes, I will invite the Chief Constable, Jo Farrell, to say a few words and introduce her team and provide some operational context and background around this subject. There then will be a 20-minute presentation delivered by Superintendent Steve Long, Head of Force Communications. And following this presentation, I will read out a selection of questions that have been sent to my office by the residents of County Durham and Darlington. And I will direct them to the Chief Constable and her team to provide the responses. It was noted that some of the questions received did have similar themes, so these have been grouped together and I will hopefully answer the most common concerns and queries. The meeting is expected to last about 90 minutes and I do hope that members of the public will find the content of the presentation useful to assist them having a better understanding about how we'll continue to hold the force to account and address local policing issues to ensure Durham's Constabulary is an efficient and effective police force. I'll now hand over to the Chief Constable, Jo Farrell, to say a few words. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you. We'll just start by introducing the team in the room here so everybody knows who I'm joined by today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Graham, the Commander for our Governance and Insights Commander.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tonya Antonis and I'm the Assistant Chief Constable.
Good morning, I'm Superintendent Steve Long. I'm Head of the Force Control Room.
Morning, everybody. I'm Kieran Irving. I'm Deputy Chief Constable, Durham Constabulary.
Morning, Gary Ridley, Assistant Chief Officer for the Force and Chief Finance Officer for the PCC.
Thank you. Just by way of introduction, before Steve gets into the main part of the presentation, contact management is obviously a really important area of business for Durham Police. This is the front door to policing and we're judged by the public in the way in which we respond to both emergency and non-emergency calls. The team that work in our control room are a group of very skilled individuals who are often dealing with people who are in crisis, who are reaching out for help, and sometimes the people we're dealing with come to the police as an alternative to other services that are stretched within the public sector. At our recent HMIC inspection, under the banner of responding to the public, we were deemed to be good in this area. There was no other force in the country that has performed higher in the area. So I'm really pleased with the position that we're in currently, but of course there's always more to do. The HMIC highlighted how knowledgeable our teams were in the communications room, how good they were in terms of identifying vulnerability and people who've been repeat victims of crimes. They were good at assessing people's needs and they were very skilled in terms of determining what the appropriate response should be from the police. But what we've seen post the pandemic is a significant increase in emergency 999 calls, both to Durham Police and across the country. And the key drivers around that have been increased calls around people who are not only vulnerable, but have violence tendencies. And often the police are responding to those calls and individuals have psychological issues. We're also seeing an increase in what I would call partner demand. So this is other areas of the public sector where people aren't able to access those services, though that might be in relation to mental health, it might be in relation to ambulance service, and not being able to get the response from those organisations, they come to policing as a last resort. So we're taking a number of measures in terms of improving our staffing, and Steve will describe this in more detail in a moment. But longer term, we're going to need to look at more digital solutions so that we are fit for purpose moving forward and can absorb and deal with what we anticipate to be more and more demand on policing services, both in relation to emergency and non-emergency calls. Thank you. Steve, do you want to?
Will the presentation be put up, or do I need to put the presentation up on the screen?
Can you put it up, Steve?
I think I'll need a formal invite to the meeting because I didn't get a formal invite to the meeting, so I could join if I just get an invite through.
Yeah, we'll sort that for you now, Steve.
To come through, Steve?
As I'm just joining now. Should just be loading up now.
Brilliant. I can see it. Everybody else, yeah? Lovely.
Okay.
Very much stick for that.
Okay, so I thought I would just start off with a bit of an overview of what type of demand and the number of calls for service that we get each year into the force. So as you can see, for the period between the 1st of April 21 and the 31st of March 22, the force received just over 277,101 calls and just over 103,999 calls. In addition to that, the force dealt with what we call 14,000 live chat requests for service, so an online solution, which is essentially a non-emergency type incident, so a 101 by another name. When you think about that type of demand, when you take together the live chat, 14,000 calls for service, and the 101, that has largely been the same now for about the last 4 or 5 years. Those numbers are remaining quite flat. However, 999 is increasing at a significant tilt and has been increasing every year since 2015, apart from the period where we had some suppressed demand during COVID. But outside of that, it is going up in double-digit figures each year. So the 999 call volumes have increased from 70,000 calls per year in 2015 to, as I said, just over 103,000 calls in 2022. That's a significant increase of just over 40%. And within that, just to give you a flavour of what it's like right now, because there's no signs of this easing, when I've checked the call numbers for the control room, by the close of play tomorrow, we will have received the same number of 999 calls for the same period of the whole of May last year. And we'll still have 4 more days left in this month, which will probably equate to another 1,200 999 calls between now and the end of the month. It's probably going to be about another 15% year-on-year increase for the month of May. So there is no signs of the 999 call volumes easing at all. And that's a really important point, because this has a significant impact on our ability to answer the 101. Because the 101 is for non-emergency incident demands, we have to prioritise that 999 calls coming in. And within that, the demands on police have changed. Chief Constable's already alluded to this. The force is dealing with more calls relating to missing people, concerns for public safety. There is more vulnerability, there is more people in crisis, and we're seeing this each day. Our partners will cite exactly the same. We've got good relationships with both the NHS and NEAS, the North East Ambulance Service, and they're also dealing with significantly high numbers of requests for service. And when the whole system is at capacity, there is an impact on policing. We're a responsive service. The public know we'll respond, and we get that transfer of demand. People call us when they're in mental health crisis. They call us when they can't access an ambulance to get to the hospital. This has a significant impact upon us. I wanted just to give an overview of how we manage contact in the control room, because it's really important. We're not a contact centre. It's not about somebody replacing their mobile phone or changing to a new gas and electric company. It isn't like that. What we're about is we're managing risk. We're managing threats to the public, and we use what we call a Thrive assessment. And within that Thrive assessment, we're assessing what is the threat, what is the harm to the people involved, what are the risks involved, what level of investigation is required, what types of vulnerability are involved, and what is the best engagement for that member of the public. We successfully implemented Thrive in 2015, and this replaced the old graded response policy. And it's about obtaining quality information at the outset. So this is about things like identifying what we call the golden hour principles, so that we make sure we get the right response for the public, it's the right investigation. We give advice around preserving evidence, because fundamentally every investigation starts in the control room. It's really important that we get the right information at the first point of contact. What you can see there is what that's done in obtaining that quality information. It's increased our average call management time by around 3 minutes from 2015. And as a result of that, calls take longer. It's increasingly challenging then to answer all of the calls coming into the force. And as I just talked about, that ever rising 999 demand, what we've got is a longer call management time, but also significant numbers of 999 calls coming in. But again, as Chief started at the outset, we've been commended by HMI CFRS a number of times for the Thrive process in the control room. And the next slide really speaks to it. This is an exact extract from what HMI talked about in our last Peel assessment. And what you've got there is the force normally answers calls from the public promptly. It regularly achieves or exceeds the target for answering 999 and 101 calls. And this is the important piece for me. It consistently applies a structured approach to assessing risk. All contact management staff are trained in applying Thrive. And where appropriate, we give advice on preserving evidence around crime prevention. Call handlers are good at looking for and identifying vulnerability, and that's really important. Members of the public can also contact the force using the online chat service, the live chat, which I've already talked about. So 101 specifically, as I've said, the 277,000 calls. What's important in those 277,000 calls is that only around 45 to 50% of those calls become an incident. So a lot of the calls that come into the 101 system are for all kinds of policing services. That might be things like obtaining an update on a crime report, ringing us because there's been a change in terms of what's happening around the incident that they were originally reporting. There's requests for non-policing services. So when are we recruiting? It's the full gambit of all things around policing that comes in through the 101 system. And often there is things that come through 101 which should be dealt with by other agencies. And we signpost from first point of contact to other agencies. And we're doing a lot around that. So in terms of trying to reduce some of those 101s coming in, we've provided all frontline officers with mobile phones that members of the public can contact officers direct. They can pick up their emails on the mobile phones and check force systems. There are opportunities to just contact officers direct rather than coming into the 101. You'll see there the average answer time for 101 calls over the last 12 months is 2 minutes and 18 seconds. 19% of all 101 calls were abandoned during this period, and that's against a target of less than 10%. So that isn't a nationally agreed target, but that's the target that the force sets for ourselves in terms of good performance. And that's where we were for that period over the last 12 months. We'll just add a little bit more context around that. A single incident can have a real impact on our ability to answer the 101. So I've put up there Storm Arwen. We can receive hundreds of calls around a single incident. which just reduces our ability to answer a call. It can be as simple as that, or a significant road traffic collision, and we can be inundated with calls, and then the public will experience a significant delay on the 101 because we need to answer those calls that are coming in on the emergency line. As I've said previously, the Thrive assessments added that extra 3 minutes, and we need to be mindful of that. But we understand that 101 is a priority, and there is investment in both staff and new technology planned over the next 12 months, which I will talk about in a further slide. 999, I've talked about that high demand coming in and some of those percentages in terms of where we're at. 27.8% higher than the same period for 2021, 11% higher than pre-COVID levels. All forces support each other with 999 demand, and this is really important. We have what's called the buddy system, and we do handle 999 calls for other forces, and we transfer only small numbers of calls to other forces. So we are coping with our own demand, but we are fielding calls for other forces. But that's important. That's for a whole host of reasons. It might not just be about demand. Sometimes forces experience problems with their telephony system. They might have some downtime and they can't receive 999 calls. We must be able to provide that response on behalf of other forces because 999 calls critical to managing that risk. And we've talked about some of that transferred 999 demand already from other services, which does impact on our ability to answer 999 calls. And we are routinely dealing with that day in, day out. I hear it every day, not only 101, but also coming into our switchboard. Don't abandon 999 calls. So when we talked about that 19% abandonment rate on the 101, we have very low numbers of 999 calls that are abandoned. We have a number of systems within the force control room which make sure that we catch every 999 call. And we abandoned very, very low numbers, single figures on a weekly basis. And as you can see there, for the period last year, we answered 72.9% of all 999 calls were answered within 10 seconds. There is some BT data which will be published. What says there the end of May, it's likely to be the middle of June now, which will differ from the force in the way they measure us and the way we measure ourselves internally. And there will be some differences. We've already identified a delay on the telephony platform, which we didn't realise was there, but we're already replacing that telephony platform. We've taken the initiative straight away, and we will be replacing the telephony platform, which I'll talk about on some of the digital solutions as we move forward. And the median answer time for all 999 calls is 10 seconds. Control room staffing, this is the really important stuff for me. It's about the people. People are the most important aspect of our control room. It takes 6 months to recruit new call handling staff. That might seem like a long time, but what we do is we put them through a rigorous assessment process because we need to understand if they've got the right skills and the right abilities that you need to be a call handler. It's a really difficult and challenging job. So there's an assessment centre, interviews. Clearly the control room has a lot of access to sensitive information, so they have to go through vetting. So it's 6 months to recruit new call handling staff. And we've invested heavily in new call handling staff, an investment of over £300,000 this year. That's an additional 12 extra call handlers, some of which are already in the room being mentored as we speak, and some are in training as we speak on their first 6-week course. That 6 weeks training is followed by 8 weeks of mentoring with an experienced call handler sat beside them. And this is a really important bit for me. We train our people to care. They're going to deal with lots of traumatic incidents. They're going to deal with people in crisis, people who've been burgled, people who've been attacked. They need to be able to care. And that takes time to get people up to speed, to give them the confidence. The competency comes after about 12 months. So it's a long time for call handlers to become experienced and really competent in what we ask them to do. And because of those challenges, recruitment and retention of staff is really challenging in the control room. We know that between 2017 and 2020, around 34% of call handlers who were recruited during this period have either left the organisation or they've transferred to other roles. And you probably know this already, but obviously policing's going through a period of time now where we are recruiting additional police officers. Some people come in to be call handlers and transfer to become police officers. We do think that's a good thing because they get a real grounding in some of that risk assessment that will really make them a better police officer when they go out and serve the public. But it does have an impact on the control room. So we're constantly recruiting. We're recruiting 4 times this year. That additional investment is already there. And we should, by the end of the summer, once they're trained and outside of their mentoring period, have that additional 12 call handlers in the control room. But mindful of that recruitment and retention and retaining those people is really, really difficult. Digital solutions. So we're currently scoping a number of different digital solutions to provide the public with alternatives to the 101 system. We know it's a public expectation, but it isn't as simple as just buying a digital solution that allows the public to report something online. We've got to really reassure ourselves that we can assess that, and we can assess that in real time so that we know people will report all kinds of incidents and crimes through a digital reporting solution. But we've got to reassure ourselves that we can apply that thrive in a timely manner. We can identify vulnerability and risk, and then we can get the right response for the public for anything that we then channel through a self-service digital reporting portal. But ultimately, we know that's what the public want. We know that the public want to obtain updates on previously reported incidents, contact police officers dealing with their case without having to ring 101, and actually maybe track their crime or incident. And that's really important. So we are scoping a number of solutions at the moment, and we are liaising with a number of companies to make sure we get the right solution for Durham and the right solution for the public. We're also replacing the telephony platform. That's going to take place over the next 9 months. So by the end of this year or the early part of next year, we'll have a new telephony platform that will improve our ability on the 999 system, make it quicker, more efficient, and make sure that we have a really, really good, solid platform in which to operate. But it will never be a one-click system. I know I'm the same. I now expect, I can click onto Amazon, I can click onto Amazon Prime and I can order something now in one click. Policing will never be like that. It will always be a little bit slower, but we need a responsive system. And that's what we hope a digital solution will provide. It will remove some of the demand from the 101 system. That will in turn allow us to make sure the call handlers are targeting the 101 system and the 999 system. And we can achieve that 90% of 999 calls within 10 seconds and really be responsive to the 101 system. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. That was a really interesting and enlightening presentation that I'm sure councillors, partners and residents will benefit from listening to, because it's great when we have these sessions, because after we've had them, I can point people to the online presentation and they can hear what you've just said as well in detail. So I really thank you for that. And I will be encouraging people who want to know more about the 101 contact methods and 999, etc., to view your presentation that we will make available online after this meeting. I now want to put the people's questions to the Chief and her executive team. So the first question that I've had is, what is the current force position and process for uploading dash cam footage? And I'm going to put this one to the deputy. It's Kieran Irving.
Okay, Joy, thank you for that question. Probably start off to explain that the force does currently accept dash cam footage in relation to specific incidents that are reported, and we do that through a link that we send out to somebody who might report a particular incident. But at the moment that is limited in terms of capacity and capability. We're currently working through options simpler and easier for the assessing a number of digital solutions that we'll be able to bring in that will effectively bypass the force control room, so we don't put any additional demand there, and then take that dash cam footage direct to a dedicated team within our roads and armed policing teams. As you know, we've recently separated from Cleveland, so we've got more operational autonomy in relation to how we direct the roads and our policing team. So we'll be able to bring that in. We anticipate that towards the end of this calendar year, if not the beginning of 2023, and we're looking at a number of options around that.
I think obviously we found out yesterday there's quite a few people interested in that, so I really welcome that update. The next question I think is for you as well, Kieran, is have the force got enough staff to deal with the number of dashcam submissions, and what is the turnaround time currently?
Well, I think inevitably any new activity forces the executive team to make choices in relation to where it puts its effort, so that we're operationally effective. We're confident that we will have sufficient staff to deal with the dashcam submissions as we bring in the new solution towards the end of the year, and that'll come with some realignment of resource and hopefully some finance being released on account of the referrals that we might make into driver improvement schemes and similar. I think our hope is that over time the advertising and the impact of this scheme will move us towards safer roads and reduce the number of killed or seriously injured people on the roads of Durham and Darlington. There's a word of caution around this. We do need to understand as dashcams become more readily available, and they're now starting to move to be standard in vehicles, particularly new vehicles. We won't necessarily know the extent to which that will increase in demand over the course of the first sort of few months of the year. So we'll need to keep that properly under review. I suppose specifically people will understand and know about a broader operation in policing called Operation Snap. And we'll be looking to introduce something which is very similar to that in force. The majority of these matters we'd look to deal with within 1 or 2 days of the receipt, but we'll need to be mindful of the overall impact for us in terms of capacity over that period. But that's the sort of aim for us.
Thanks very much, Kieran. The next question I want to put to our Assistant Chief Constable, Tonya Antonis. What is the maximum amount of time the force is supposed to take when answering a 101 call? As with my experience, it's taken between 2 and 20 minutes, and this has come from a member of the public. It's over to you, Tonya.
Yeah, good morning, thank you. And I think Steve articulated it really well in the presentation he's just delivered. Whilst there isn't a maximum time, the time that we've taken between April last year and March of this year has been 2 minutes, 18 seconds. And again, I think Steve really articulated well the impact that we're seeing around the increase in the 999 calls, which you've heard increase significantly. And I'm sure nobody would argue with the fact that that has to be the priority in answering those 999 calls. But I think where we're really trying to make that difference is the investment that Steve spoke about in our call handlers. So there is no maximum time, but it has been 2 minutes 18. But what we really look at is that abandonment rate. And as repeating what Steve has said, you know, it sits at 19%. We would like that to be nearer 10%, and we're working really hard to address that.
The next question I'd like to put to Kieran. In this world of modern technology, why is it that we cannot report a non-emergency incident via a report portal to be picked up by cops on a notification system?
Okay, thanks, Joy. I think as Steve said, as part of the main presentation, we are reviewing a number of digital contact solutions to enable that self-same thing to happen. I think also, as Steve pointed out, it's much more complex, the reporting of crime and incidents, than it is necessarily reporting a change to your car insurance or changing of a warranty on your washing machine. There's lots of complexity and detail that sits behind the reporting of crime and antisocial behaviour, which then enables us to put the best response in place. And of course, that front door, whether it be a real front door, a telephone based or a digital one, is the commencement of an investigation and not just the provision of flat information. What we want to do is make sure that we have a system that will enable a whole range of tasks and activities for our local public, not just the reporting of incidents, but also then the tracking of those crimes in terms of investigations and resolution, and the access to a broader range of policing service such as firearms licensing, the ability to report road traffic collisions in a seamless manner, and a whole broad range of other things that we do, potentially including the ability of us to be able to automatically signpost people to other agencies if a report was something that pertained to health or local authority partners. In order to get this right, we need to understand the detail of that. We need to acknowledge that there's a significant financial investment behind that and a technological and training uplift for staff. Much of the statistical analysis behind this would point to only limited diversion away from 101 systems unless you absolutely get the system right and proper, because people do become frustrated and then they ring us up anyway. So we need to be really careful that we put the right solution in place. Some of the solutions that forces have already are no more than a digital front door, whereby the member of the public may well report the matter online, but all that does is create an email which needs to be managed in the sense of a flat document, and then we're keying the information into our own systems. So it's almost a partial digital solution, and we're looking to try and bring something in that is more streamlined and whole system to help us along that way. And of course, I think as part of the review work, once we start to identify appropriate systems and approaches, we'll want to speak to local communities, both ourselves and through your office, to ensure that the services that we bring online are wanted and needed by our local communities, so that we make sure it's tailored appropriately for the people of Durham and Darlington.
Thanks, Kieran. I think that really sort of, I think a lot of people would be interested in your responses there, because they only see the front door, they don't see the back door, and the thing is just picked up and don't see that it has to be sort of double entried. And I think what you outlining there is our solution will be more efficient and effective. A digital solution that actually reduces the time and the effort, but makes it more, like you say, streamlined to do that for both the public and for the officers as well. So I think that's really, really helpful and very, encouraging that we look into that solution. The next question I'm putting to Tonya. What's the best way for members to report community intelligence?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, community intelligence is really, really important for us, and it's really important that we're able to gather and respond to the intelligence that we receive. And we would always encourage people to report that via 101 or the live chat that, again, Steve spoke about earlier. But I would really encourage and direct the public to report community intelligence via Crime Stoppers. Now, I would say that as the national policing lead for Crime Stoppers, so that puts us for County Durham and Darlington in a really good position as the national lead. So Crime Stoppers, some people will be aware, it does operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It provides people the opportunity to provide their intelligence anonymously. But we have really good networks with Crime Stoppers, as you'll appreciate, with my lead. So we work really closely with them. And in my experience, it is a really effective and efficient way for people to report intelligence. But importantly, it now allows us to really assess it and make sure that we act properly. We've got really good internal processes when that intelligence comes in around how we assess it and how we turn that into real-time work to help us tackle those issues. So I would really encourage the public to use Crime Stoppers.
Thanks, Tonya. And as we were talking recently, it was really encouraging when we met with the regional manager, and they said that the reports to Crime Stoppers from Durham was one of the highest increases in the country. So it's really, really important that if people, how they do it, the more we report it, the better it is. And I think I welcome a lot of the neighbourhood teams who were, when they've come across a crime, detected a crime, made arrests, we often give the recognition that the intelligence has come from the members of the public. Some people might not want to ring 101, but I think what you've just outlined there is the Crime Stoppers is a great resource there that we really need to get more people to utilise, so you and the officers can have the intelligence to make it more, putting your resources where the risk is in our community. So thank you very much for that update. There's another one for you here, Tonya, and it comes from, this is something that I get asked a lot because we've got a very sort of different spread of towns and parishes across County Durham and Darlington. And they've had in the past, we've had detailed information being given. We have had huge cuts between 2010 and 2020. We've lost 400 officers, but I think that need for local intelligence and local information is asked for regularly. So this one's actually come from Pelton Parish Council member, and he's asking, or they're asking, sorry, could we be given regular updates locally on stats for calls received against those that fell off after no response and the hang-ups?
Okay, thank you. Well, unfortunately, the telephone networks that we've got don't enable us to drill down into that level of detail. So we can't drill it down to like a local sector or beat level. What we can gather, of course, is that force level. So it's at force level only, which I appreciate for the council that have asked that question. That's really difficult, but we may be able to do something as we improve our telephony over time. But as things are at the moment, we can only do it at force level. And again, when they're asking about the calls that have dropped off, probably repeating a lot of what Steve has said earlier. We spoke about that 19% of drop off from 101 calls against our target of 10%, but how we're really trying to support that with extra staff in the control room, and of course the demands, and apologies, I'm repeating myself, around 999, but also the support we give as part of the buddy system that Steve spoke about when we're supporting other forces managing their 999 calls at their demand. And I suppose what I would just repeat again is that what we do know is out of the 101 calls that we do receive, less than 50% of them are incident related. So at the moment we can't get that information at that sector, at that beat level. It's force level only. But again, I know the neighbourhoods involved in discussions at that parish council level will be able to give a local overview of what's happening in their communities, and will have a really good understanding of what the demand is there and what can happen there.
Thanks, Tanya. And this one is a question for Kieran. What processes are you supposed to undertake to report an incident and get an incident reference number if you're a horse rider on the road? We cannot use the online contact as we are not a vehicle, and without these incident numbers, when we have no official register to show the amount of incidences in this area regarding car drivers and horse riders. Other forces have an online incident line for riders to use. This would make reporting so much easier.
Excuse me. Okay, thanks, Joy. I think as it currently stands, we would encourage horse riders who are subject to the antisocial or inappropriate use of the roads by car drivers or motorcyclists, perhaps, to use 101 or live chat as the appropriate route at this point in time. Clearly, we will include this as part of our considerations for scoping out our digital reporting solutions that we've talked about as one of the previous answers. One thing I would add, though, I think with horse riders in particular, as we would probably promote with cyclists, if they were minded to have the small GoPro type cameras on their helmets to be able to capture the information at the time of some antisocial driving or inappropriate driving by vehicle users, then that would help us when it comes to that report, insofar as we can provide then a link for somebody to send that information in, and then we can take action accordingly. Inevitably, that type of thing that we would consider as part of our expansion in that space towards the end of this year. But at the moment, it's very much when they get home, a 101 call or live chat, and if we can get the registration number of the vehicle, then we can follow that up.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kieran. And I think this is sort of picked up on the presentation earlier, that the live chat, when I spent some time with the call handlers, they said actually it didn't necessarily take demand away from the 101, it just sort of created a new people that were more likely to come forward to use the chat. So it is quite a popular service. So this next question sort of relates to the live chat. It's to you, Kieran. Will the live chat facility ever be 24 hours?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that there is a fixed and finite resource sitting in our force control room and also sitting in our inquiry desks, and we currently align live chat from 9 AM to 6 PM, which is in accordance with business hours, and not too dissimilar to the facilities offered by both other forces and other agencies who have that kind of system in place. From our experience, we recognise that as the time progresses during the day, particularly as we move into the evenings and overnight, the demand for this type of reporting drops off significantly and moves to more of those urgent requests for support from members of the public to serious incidents and crime and antisocial behaviour. So that's the time when we see our 101 and in particular 999 call demand start to spike. So we do need to make sure that we can prioritise resource towards that immediate response work that we need to do. However, there's lots of work going on in the digital space in relation to contact options, including the use of social media and other facilities. And we'll be looking towards ensuring that we've got the appropriate means in place to manage digital contact on a 24/7 basis as time passes, and particularly as we bring in some of the technological support that we want to bring in over the course of the next year or so. That may mean an increase in live chat, but it may also mean increase in monitoring of things like Twitter, Facebook and other social media feeds, whereby people might choose to report things in a different way. We're just not currently geared up to take that type of reporting on a 24/7 basis, but it'll be part of considerations moving forward.
Thank you, Kieran. I think that just sort of signals that the investment that we've made, you know, when we went out to the public through the precept about, you know, council tax and where the investment needed. I think obviously what you're saying today is that you've listened to all these things and they're going to be picked up. And I think that, you know, the 101, the live chat, it's one of those the key issues that has been addressed. So it's welcome news that the investment's going to be seen and that the public are going to get the experience that they're looking for in that area. And I also have to say that it's welcome that when we do have these facilities that you are open to pilot and, you know, to look at extending the hours, because I know that was done with the live chat. It's just to use those experiences and how it impacts upon demand, but then how it facilitates the design of a new product that addresses operational as well as community needs. So really helpful information on that one. The next one is for Tonya. If I want to report antisocial behaviour, but I don't want to call 101, what's the best way to report it? And can I contact my local neighbourhood police officer directly?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and actually the contact details for every neighbourhood officer is available on the Force website. So if you go to the Force website, it will include email addresses, direct dial extension numbers and facilities to leave a message on a voicemail. I think I pick up as well, Joy, on something you said in your opening about people calling around antisocial behaviour and are sometimes confused as to, is it a matter for the police or is it a matter for local authority, or where should their complaint be directed? And there's a really useful guide on the Constabulary website which talks about the types of antisocial behaviour that the police will deal with and other matters that should be directed elsewhere. So there's lots of really useful information on the Force website that I would encourage people to go on and have a look at. I would still say, even if people are reluctant around 101, if they're trying to deal with the antisocial behaviour issues that are happening in the here and now. I'd still encourage them to dial 101. And of course, we would always say if there's a significant threat and, you know, and an emergency, it would be 999. But yeah, go to the Force website. There's some really useful details on there.
Thanks, Tonya. And I think as our office, we can promote that facility as well, because I do get asked that a lot. And I think some people forget that there's resources there. So from our help to help us and the public, we'll try to promote that link as well, Tonya. So welcome that, because it's people do like to know the local officers and how to contact them. And it also, as you mentioned, it takes the demand off the 101 if they're talking about a local issue that they want to speak about. The final question, it's for Kieran, and the question is, what are my rights if I want to see an officer in person, regardless of what I've reported?
Well, Joy, I'll probably start this off with a slightly controversial response, in the sense that there aren't any rights as such in terms of the police response, so that there isn't a specific right to demand an officer presence in person, regardless of the nature of the incident. But we will do everything we can to attend to the needs of those who are most vulnerable in our communities and those who suffer the highest harm offending. And what I would say, I would ask the public to trust our judgment in terms of the approaches that we adopt. We dealt with over 170,000, nearly 170,000 incidents in the last financial year, and recorded just around about 60,000 crimes. We can't realistically attend to all of those crimes in person, and sometimes the best approach for us is to do a telephone or remote-based investigation to link that to other crimes or other incidents where physical attendance is going to bring the best result. As Steve's mentioned in the main presentation here, we use the Thrive assessment model to determine the most appropriate response to an incident, and that really does focus on threat, risk and harm, and we really do look to attend to those vulnerabilities that are there within our communities. And if anything, the assessment from our inspectorate points to how well the force performs in this area. So I really would encourage the public to trust the decisions that we make, and accept that we will make the best and well-intentioned decisions in any particular moment. Now, of course, where we need to respond immediately or as a priority response to incidents where the threat and risk is palpable, we will do our level best to get there as quickly as we can, and of course get there within the national standards. It is more likely, though, where we see incidents which are less serious or where there's a less imminent need for attendance, we'll either do something scheduled or we do it virtually through our virtual investigation team, and do a personal contact, but by telephone. I'll reassure the public that when you are spoken to by a member of the virtual investigation, it will either be an experienced police officer or an experienced police staff investigator who will be able to gather as much information on the telephone as they would be able to gather if they were there in person. And I just want to provide some extra reassurance, which is another sample, I think, of where Durham is operating above and beyond the standards that might be seen elsewhere in the country. If somebody reports a neighbourhood-based crime or a piece of neighbourhood-based antisocial behaviour, then that goes across to the neighbourhood team in the local area who review it, and as a minimum you will get some further contact from your local PCSO to provide some reassurance and crime prevention information, and alternatively the option of further contact there to explore any broader concerns. But I would, like to reassure the public that we do, in nearly all circumstances, make the right decisions, and we certainly make them with the best of intentions. And it just isn't necessarily realistic that everybody would receive a personal visit, regardless of the incident.
Much, Kieran, and I think that's been really helpful and very comprehensive presentation and reports. Before I wrap up, can I just hand over to Jo? Is anything that you want to add to the presentations and any of the questions or answers, Jo, before I summarise?
Yeah, thanks, Joy. I hope that people will agree that we've been able to give some in-depth detail into what is a very complex area of policing, the front door of policing, but a group of individuals who are dealing with crimes, life at risk situations, road traffic collisions, extreme weather, antisocial behaviour, issues around vulnerability, often linked to the capacity of our partners. So they are there trained and ready to deal with all those complex situations, and in doing so provide a response to the public. But it's clear by the statistics that we've evidenced here today that there is some pressure on the whole of the system, and therefore we are intelligently exploring what are our options in terms of greater digital options to the public in order to make the system smoother, more efficient, but at the same time provide the best service depending on the issue that we are dealing with. So we're looking at those options. We're determining where we make the best investment and get good value for money, and with always an eye to how do we improve this service, knowing what the future is likely to look at and will be as we move forward. So I hope that's given people an in-depth insight into what this is about, and at the same time reassure people that we know what we need to do moving forward, and we'll make wise decisions in terms of the investment we're going to make. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jo. This now brings me to the end of the public accountability meeting. I hope that the presentation delivered and the questions that have followed have been really useful to everybody. I would like to assure the residents of County Durham and Darlington that I will continue to work with the Chief Constable, his team and partners to engage and empower communities to play an active role in crime prevention, increasing the level of crime reporting, particularly in our rural communities, reporting in community intelligence, and resolving local issues that matter most to all of our communities. These contact arrangements touches upon all 6 priorities in my crime plan. Business, safer communities, safer online, safer roads and safer countryside. Policing should be intelligence-led and data-driven, and I'm committed to making it easier, faster and more convenient to report crime and antisocial behaviour, giving the residents the confidence and the reassurance they need to report issues. I've personally met with the control room handlers and spoken to staff about their daily demand faced by the service. This has enabled me to better understand how the force control room operates, and the volume and types of calls they receive. I'm committed to supporting the force with their ongoing recruitment of extra call handlers in order to minimise vacancies and to ensure that performance is maintained. We spend this invaluable time in the control room. I recognise that call handlers have an extremely demanding role, which requires making quick decisions in very high pressure situations. I would really like to take this opportunity to thank all the force control room staff for their continued hard work. It's important that the force continue to communicate with the public in terms of the demand they receive, which will help the public to contact the right agency when there isn't an immediate life-threatening emergency. On a final note, I just want to mention that the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners local policing portfolio has launched a national survey to understand more about the public's experience of contacting their local police forces via 999 and 101, as well as other non-emergency contact services. The survey has been set up to better understand the linkages between preferred contact methods of types of crime being reported, waiting times and public satisfaction on different demographics, not only the national level, but right down to 4th letter postcodes. By asking respondents for their 4th letter postcodes, officers be able to understand and to produce more precise local analysis, allowing for evaluations amongst the urban and rural areas within the force. This survey has been widely promoted by my office to ensure a high take-up and to help shift an antisocial behaviour to the police. The survey is open for 5 weeks and closes on the 26th of June. Today's session, can I really thank the Chief Constable and her team for their participation and presentations, and I look forward to the next accountability session where the public will be able to put their questions to the police chief and her team. Thank you.
Thank you.
The recording. I've stopped.